Hey everyone, let's get started on the next stone here. I've got my stone painted black and I used my stencil to transfer my grid lines. If you're not using grid lines, just find your center line or your center dot and make a little mark where that's supposed to be, and we will work out from there. We're using the same color palette, the same set of tools, and the same set of rhinestones. So everything is the same as in the previous session. You're just going to want to gather up your supplies and then we'll get going. For our center dot, we are going to use our 10mm tool and our dark teal paint, and we're going to make one 10mm center dot. When you're finished with the 10mm center dot, we are going to switch to our 1.5mm tool. So for me, that's my blue stylus, the large end, and I'm going to use my light teal. I'm going to make a dot on my north side, my south side, my east and west. That gives us 8. Then I'm going to go through and add one dot in between each of those. Or I'm sorry, that gives us 4, and now we're going to make the 8 by putting the in between dots. So now we have 8, and I'm going to go back through and add 1 in between each section. That gives us 16. In the next row, we're going to use our 4mm tool, and I'm going to use the light purple paint. And if you have grid lines, we are going to add one dot on each line. So I'm going to start with my north, my south, my east, and my west. And then the line in between. So we're going to end up with 8 of these. In between each of these, I'm going to get my 1.5mm tool and gold paint. And we're going to add one dot in between centered. So we have 8 light purple dots and then 8 gold dots. Then in the next row, we're going to switch to our 6mm tool. and I'm going to stick with the light teal for the next row. And we're going to work on the rows with the gold dots. So not the rows with the purple that are on the lines. So in between each purple, next to the gold dot, we are going to add a light teal dot in 6 millimeters. We'll end up with 8 of those. Again, we're going to add gold dots in between. This time I'm going to use my 3 millimeter tool for the gold dots, and one goes in between each of those light teal. Right, for the next step, we're going to go up one more size to 8 millimeters, and I'm going to go back to the light purple, and wherever there is a gold dot, I'm going to add an 8 millimeter light purple dot. And so for me, this falls on a line. And we're going to go around the circle and add 8 of those. Sometimes when you're working with the larger rods, you have to go back and just make sure that your edges are nice and round. Usually they do a good job, but every once in a while I want to get back in there and just fix something. You can do that with a smaller stylus tool. Don't feel like you have to. If your dots are perfect, leave them be. Once again, we are going to add gold dots in between. I'm going to use my 4 millimeter tool for this. And we're going to add a gold dot in between each of those light purple. After you add those 8 gold dots, I'm going to go back to my 8 millimeter rod, and I'm going to use my dark purple paint. And we are going to add 1 dot next to each gold. as I mentioned, sometimes with those larger dots, you may want to fix the shape if you don't feel like you got a perfect dot. Now what we're going to do with these purple dots is we are going to walk the dots around them. So I'm going to get my 2.5mm stylus. So that's my green stylus on the small end. For me, yours may be different. I'm going to dip into the gold paint, and I'm going to give each one of these a center dot. Once I have those center dots, I'm going to use my 1.5mm tool, and I'm going to walk the dots on each side. So when you walk the dots, you're going to want to dip into the paint and then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can fit 6 comfortably, so I'm going to try to do 6 on each side. Next, I'm going to go back to my gold paint, but I am going to use my 3mm tool. So we're going to put gold in between as we have done in the previous rows, but this time it's going to be a little smaller in comparison. So 3mm, and I'm going to put it right up next to that light purple. And so we work our way around, and there are 8 of those. For the next row, we're going to switch to a 10mm rod and our dark teal paint. And in between our purple petals, I am going to add a dark teal dot right in between those. And if you need to, feel free to clean up the edges of those larger dots. All right, we are going to walk the dots around these teal petals. And the first tool that I'm going to use is my 2.5 millimeter. And we're going to use the light teal. And I'm going to do my center dots 2.5 millimeters. Once you've got your centers, we're going to walk the dots on each side with 1.5 millimeters. I feel like 6 fits comfortably. But again, yours might be a little different from mine. Then we're going to switch to our 3 millimeter tool and the lightest purple and add a center dot. So with our center dots being 3 millimeters, I'm going to switch to 2.5 millimeters and walk the dots on each side. Since this is a larger size tool, I can only fit 5. Go ahead and count. Whatever you fit on your first go round, you're just going to repeat that. Once you finish that second layer of petals, we are going to use our 3 millimeter tool and gold paint, and we are going to add a set of 3 at the end of each of these inner petals. And what we're going to do first is we are going to do a dot that's spaced just a little farther out. I don't want it right up against the first dot. And once you have that, we place an equal sized dot on each side of that. So it gives us a little set of 3. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Make sure you leave yourself enough room to add in the 2 second dots. Once you finish adding those around the inner petals, we're going to add those around the outer petals as well. And it's the same process. So you leave a little room and add that middle dot. And then 1 on each side. Next, what we're gonna do is I am gonna take my 2.5mm tool and we're gonna make some lines with the bright purple. So I am gonna dip into that bright purple, and right next to this set of 3 that I made, I'm going to make a dot, pause for a second, and then pull that line inward. And I'm going to do that on each side. So make a dot, pause for a second, and then slowly pull that inward. And I'm going to make those swipes on each side. Now this is it for our base design, and this design here is not all that complicated. It's a simple pattern that we've created, but where we're going to zhuzh it up is with the top dots and the rhinestones. And so that's where some of the beauty of this pattern comes in. Before you do top dots or rhinestones, you do want to make sure that your first layer is slightly dry. So it definitely needs to have a film over it, and you don't want to be able to squash any of the paint. So now is a great time to pause the video and take a quick break if you need to, and come back, and when your piece is somewhat dried, move on to the top dots. Now I'm going to start with the rhinestones because that gives some of the paint a little extra time to dry. And I am going to add my first layer of small rhinestones in my first light purple ring. And so I've got some white glue that I have put on my palette here. I am going to use my dotting tool, and I'm going to dot the glue onto my dots here. And then I'm going to place a rhinestone in the center, and I've got 8 of those. In the very center, I'm going to use my 6mm tool and my gold paint, and I am going to add a gold center dot in the very middle. Where I have this ring of light teal, I'm going to use my 4mm tool and my dark teal, and I am going to add a dot, a darker dot, in the center. Then in the next row, we have light purple. I'm going to move up to my 6mm tool and my darker purple. And I'm going to add a 6mm darker purple dot in the center. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same 6mm tool and some gold paint, and I'm going to add a 6mm dot in the center of the teal outer petal. Alright, I'm going to pause for just a second again and give this a little dry, and then I'm going to come back and add a layer of rhinestones where we did the light and purple dots. So again, go ahead and pause, give your stone a few minutes to dry, and then come on back. Alright, so again, my stone is fairly dry. It's not completely dry, but dry enough. I'm going to add my glue dots in the center, and I'm putting them on the ring where we have a light purple dot with the dark purple top dot. And then again, I'm going to use the smaller of my rhinestones, which is my size 12. And I'm going to add a small rhinestone in the center. Oops, that one does not want to let go. There we go. Then the last place I'm going to add rhinestones is going to be right next to this inner set of 3. And I'm not going to add there's no dot there. I'm not going to add a dot. I'm just going to add my glue, and then I'm going to add my large rhinestone. And there you have it. So go ahead and let this design dry completely. You probably want to give it about 24 hours. If you can see any of your lines, if you sketched those in when we started, you're going to want to gently wipe those away with the wet paper towel. And then if you want to, you can go ahead and put a glaze on this to give it a nice sheen, shine, and protection. And then I will see you in the next workshop.